Stop making this success mistake. It is preventing your happiness. I know the question on your mind is then, well, what is the mistake? And that's what we're going to get into today. And this video has the potential to completely change your life. And I know, I like to think I put out content weekly that potentially could change your life, but this could change your life whether you have a health issue or not. This could change anyone and everyone's life because we all, at least in the Western world, are raised in a society that looks at success a certain way and propagates belief about success a certain way. And this video is going to flip your success paradigm on its head, I hope. And so if it does that for you and you leave this video and continue to view success in the new way, then that can be life-changing for you. So this is a picture of uh, both how you currently view success and how we want you to view success moving forward. And we'll get back to it in a little bit. This is also a picture that is demonstrative of how we are taught to look at success or gauge success in our society, but it also holds the key of how we should measure our success. And so we will return to these two pictures in a little bit, and you will look at them with a brand new set of eyes, I promise. So this information comes from a wonderful book called The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. I highly recommend you read this book or listen to it on audiobook. It's great, and this concept is Dan Sullivan's. And so I want to give him full credit because, he's the one who came up with it, and he's the one who's changing our lives by sharing it. So I'm just a conduit for him today. So let's dive into it. I'm going to draw you a picture that, again, was Dan's concept, and he teaches this. He's an entrepreneurial coach, has been for over 50 years. He owns a company called The Strategic Coach, where he's coached tens of thousands of entrepreneurs over the last 50 years toward success in business and life, etc. And so he says in his book and on his podcast and content that he's a very visual person, and when he gets aha moments, they come to him in an image, and then he'll draw that image on a whiteboard or on a easel in front of his clients, and he develops the image in real time or the thought in real time with his people. So the bones of this image are going to be his, and then I'm going to connect it to other things um, in a health realm that all of us are interested in as well. And so first, up here, we're going to draw the horizon line. So this line is the horizon. I'm going to draw a line right here, which represents where you are today. And this line down here represents where you started. Okay, so when we set goals in our society, whenever you start a goal, you begin at the starting line, right? And you set a goal, whether that's, to make $1 million this year, or, or if that's to lose 50 pounds this year, or if that's to buy that sports car, whatever it is, right? Or get that mansion. Okay, our goals are up here. And society teaches us to shoot for the highest and, oftentimes most unrealistic. So the same size mansion that LeBron James would live in, or the same size sports car, or same luxurious sports car that whoever you watch is driving. And so those goals would be unrealistic, or not necessarily unrealistic, but they'd be audacious. Okay. And you might tell your family about it and they'd be like, wow, yeah, sure, go for it, dude. But not really believe that you can do it. Right. And so you're at the starting point and you go through a certain amount of time and you're shooting towards that goal. And so say that was a goal in a year. So after that year's time, you've traveled this far. Okay. And so today you're here, you had set that goal a year ago, and you're looking up at where you're at and you're saying, okay, well, that goal is still far away. I've moved towards it for a year and I really don't feel any closer. And because that goal is still so far away, today you might feel um, depressed or like a loser or unsuccessful. Okay. And the reason that you feel that way is because we've been taught to measure success wrong. Okay. We've been taught to measure success as our ability to close this gap. All right. The problem with that is that that gap is impossible to close because that gap is the horizon. And every step I take towards the horizon line moves that far away from me. So it's impossible for me to achieve the horizon. And so if I'm judging my success by achieving the horizon line, I'll never be successful in my life. And if you are like many people in our society and you base your happiness by your success or by how the world measures success, then you'll be unhappy. I'll never be happy. And I may be depressed because I'm working so hard and I've not narrowed that gap at all because that horizon line keeps moving away from me. Okay, so uh, and you might say, well, why set goals if we can never achieve it? Well, no, we should set goals and we should even set big, hairy, audacious goals, as some authors call them. But the issue there is that it's all about how we're perceiving the goal, okay, or perceiving how we are attaining that goal, okay? Because remember, the horizon is a guide, right? If you're in a boat or in a plane or in a car and you're trying to get somewhere, you can look at the horizon and head towards it. It's a guide and it's a point in the future to aim for, but it's not attainable because again, as you move towards that horizon line, it's going to move away from you. So what we need to do when we're measuring success is what Dan Sullivan says, always measure backward. Why? Well, because if you look at where you are today and you turn around and look behind you at where you started from, you can see your gains. All right? Because all progress is in the gain. All progress happens behind you. Okay? So no matter what your goal is today, okay? If your goal is financial independence, well, today I bet you have a higher income than you did 10 years ago. Okay, so you might not be a millionaire still, but you still made gains towards uh, being more financially well off. And so if you don't look behind you to measure your gains and see the progress you've made since the starting point, and you only focus on the horizon, then you're going to be unhappy. But if you can turn around and say, wow, look how far I've come, that's where happiness comes from, is seeing your progress. Look at the success I've created over X amount of time. Okay. And now I can be encouraged instead of depressed because I can see, hey, the work I've done has paid off. I started way back there, and now look at me, I'm here. And so this is how Dan teaches his entrepreneurs to measure their quote unquote success or what they've achieved over any time period is to always measure backwards. Look back at where you started from and measure those gains. Use the horizon as a guide, but don't use the horizon to dictate your joy, your happiness, and whether or not you're a success in life. And so the reason you don't want to do that is because this also applies to your health. And when you're in the gap, you could also think of that as negative thinking. Okay, so you could look at the gap and the gain as mindsets. So negative thinking is stressful. And there's been a lot of research on stress and tigers, as I refer to it often. Okay. And remember, the stress side of the nervous system is called the sympathetic nervous system. That's the nervous system that drives fight or flight, right? So if you're running from a tiger or fighting a tiger, you're in a stress response. Well, the more stressed you are, especially if that's chronic, the faster you age. And research has shown that people who are more negative or more pessimistic, they live an average of 10 years less than happy people or positive people or optimistic people. Okay, so literally measuring yourself the wrong way could shorten your life by 10 years. Whereas living in the gain is the opposite. Living in the gain is positive mentality, optimistic. Okay, the gain functions to promote the parasympathetic nervous system, which we've talked about includes the vagus nerve, which drives rest and digest. Okay, or health and recovery. So in those same studies, the positive people live 10 years longer than the negative people. They have less viral infections, or they recover from the viral infections faster. So this concept spans not only your success in your wallet, but also your health and your lifespan. And so in thinking about the gap and the gain, let's return to our pictures that we saw at the start of the video. Here's this picture again. All right. So if we go back to our artwork concept, obviously you can see the horizon line here. That would be, our guide and our ideals. And we need a guide and ideals to give us that big, hairy goal to shoot for, but we don't want to hold ourselves to it, right? Or judge ourselves if we don't get there. Down here would be our starting spot. And then at intervals, here we are today, and here we are next week, and there we are next month, right? And at any time where the picture fails is I'm not moving the horizon line away from us. But as we go, that's what it does, right? So anytime we can look back and see in our last interval, look how far I've come since last time I measured, and since last time, and look how far I've come overall since I started. So this is the street, the dash lines on the street is one metaphor for the gap in the gain. That can work for you. Or a different image we could use is this one. And I like this one because, again, it is set up a lot like how society teaches us to be. You can see this guy here looking off at the horizon and imagine he's measuring his progress towards a goal. He might see how far that horizon line is from him and be sitting there kind of slumped and sad and depressed and like, man, I'm working so hard and I don't feel like I'm achieving anything. But if he would just turn his head around, right, and face his body this way, he could say, look, I've crossed these many boulders since I started back there somewhere. So look at the gains I've made since I started. And yes, that's my ideal and that's my goal. And if I think about what I've done to get where I am today, that probably would inform the next steps I have to take to get closer and continue to move towards the horizon. So these are the gains he's made, and this is the gap he needs to fill. And as long as you're always shooting for higher and higher, there will be a gap to fill, and that's fine as long as you are not holding yourself to the gap in terms of measuring it. You continue to measure your gains, knowing there's always more gap to fill. But if we're looking back to determine our success and our happiness, then we'll always be happy on that path towards whatever our ideal is. So how can we what strategies can we leverage to help us with this gap and gain concept? Great question. Glad you asked. So one great tool is journaling. And Journaling's great because journaling on paper, or I guess you could do your phone or computer, but writing it down provides you with an objective measure of where you've been and how far you've come. I could literally open up my journal and go back months or years in my entries and say, "Oh yeah, I remember that." Because as humans, we don't memorize the gain well. We memorize the gap well, right? We remember the traumatic events and the bad things that happened to us much more clearly and effectively than we remember the good things. And the reason for that is through our history, we had to remember dangerous things and bad things because our life was at stake. And so recognizing and remembering what could kill us had evolutionary benefit. Remembering the good things isn't as easy because as humans, we adapt to situations. So a scenario would be like, hey, I want a new truck, right? And before I get the truck, I'm anticipating it. And it's really the anticipation that is the real happiness and the real excitement. When I finally get the truck, I'm excited for a day or a week, but then eventually I adapt to having that truck, and it's no longer as exciting as it was before I had the truck. Right now, it's just, yeah, I have a truck. So now, what do we do in our society? Push the horizon out farther. Now I want an airplane, right? So that's called automaticity. As humans will adapt to the scenario we're in and make it automatic and move on. Whereas always shooting for the next thing, we're never satisfied, right? So if our happiness and our success is deemed by the things we have, then we'll never be happy or deem ourselves successful because there's always a next thing they're telling us we need to have, right? And that's where in the Declaration of Independence, when Thomas Jefferson wrote "Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness," Dr. Hardy talks about the pursuit of happiness is the wrong goal because you can pursue the horizon line, but you can never achieve it, right? So pursuit of happiness is not what we're after here. Um, Progress is what we're after, and achieving progress provides happiness. So journaling is one way to measure your gains because you've got documented proof of it, and then you've got documented proof of it for your kids and their kids to read about your life and maybe write a book about you someday. But more, kind of this moment, how could journaling benefit you? Dan Sullivan says every day you should write down three gains or three wins from your day. So real simple, 2 minutes before bed, you want to write down your three gains, and that does a couple things for you. A, it shows you how you were successful today. B, it primes your subconscious for success and positivity as you go into sleep, and it prepares you for a successful day tomorrow. If you want to prepare yourself for an even more successful day tomorrow, after you write your three gains from today, write three gains you expect to make tomorrow. And now you're setting your subconscious up for figuring out ways to make you successful in those things tomorrow. And in doing that again over time, you're building up proof to yourself that, hey, I set goals and achieve them. I set gains and achieve them. And that drives self-esteem. And that also drives gratitude. And gratitude journaling is shown in the research to really promote the lifespan benefits and the health benefits of a gain mentality. There's a study that Dr. Hardy quotes about nuns who, as they entered the convent when they were 20 years old, they asked the nuns to write explicitly about their lives. And so, over 50 years later, there was a study done that looked at the nuns. When the nuns were 85 years old, they went back and looked at the nuns' journals from when they were 20. And the nuns that, as 20-year-olds, wrote about happy, like they were happy and had a lot of gratitude and were positive outlook nuns compared to nuns that weren't as optimistic, but maybe were more pessimistic. The nuns that were more positive, I forget the exact number. I think it was 83% of those nuns lived to be 85, whereas only 34% of the nuns who were not positive made it to 85 years old. So that's a massive difference in the number of nuns that lived to a ripe old age, supporting the positive people, the positive mindset, the people with more gratitude. Again, journaling goals, I covered that. And then the key is always measure backwards. So again, if you ever had a question of, well, am I being successful? All you have to do is flop open your journal and go back in time and look at the date and where you started. And you can say, oh my gosh, look how far I've come. Back then, I thought this amount of money was so much, and now I've surpassed that, or having this many kids was my goal, and I've surpassed that, or whatever it is. So think about how you could journal to help you forget about the goal part, but just create more gratitude in your life. A gratitude journal is going to improve your mental clarity, improve your health, and probably lead to more success in all areas. So I hope this was as life-changing for you as it an eye-opening for you as it has been for me. And I hope you start measuring your success by looking backwards at where you started and seeing the progress that you've created versus holding yourself to a horizon line that you can never meet.